When I say the phrase Roblox horror, what game comes to mind first? Probably something like Doors, or maybe The Mimic. But what if I told you one of my favorite Roblox horror games is a stereotypical Obby? No, really, that's the name of the game. And you might find it hard to believe that there's a horror game hidden in here, but this is actually one of the scariest horror games I've ever played. While making this video, I actually realized it's kind of unfair to call this a Roblox horror game, because that ultimately undermines what a masterpiece this game is. This game isn't just good for a Roblox game. This game is good, but for some reason, aside from a couple of Let's Plays and guides, I really can't find that many people talking about it. You know, I would have figured that this game would have a 20-minute video essay about it called The Roblox Game Nobody Talks About, or something like that. As you guys know, I love horror games, and Roblox is almost as bad as Scratch when it comes to making slop. And there's great games on there, don't get me wrong, but Roblox has a pretty long trend of making games with recycled formulas, and they're all perfect queso content, so it just doesn't matter. I made a video about this a while ago, and it was pretty, well, an interesting time to say the least. Oh my god, it's a homeless man. But it also means that whenever I search for a new horror game, all I get is the Midnight Blank or the Blank Experience. And as much as I wish Midnight Burger was enough to suit my horror game needs, it isn't. Trying to find a way to cope with this epidemic, my brilliant idea was I was gonna play the worst rated Roblox horror game, except there's no rating system, so I didn't really know how to do that. So my next plan was to look at tier lists. Maybe I could find a game that everybody really doesn't like. But looking at all these tier lists, I couldn't really find a consistently hated game. And this one put Rat Stapler below everything, so they clearly don't know what they're talking about. But I'm sure you might have realized by now that this video isn't about a bad game. So you must wonder what I did next. And I'm not proud of it. In my desperation to find the worst Roblox horror game, I went to the most evil site I could think of, Reddit. Oh no, guys. I think I'm turning into a text-to-speech YouTube. What is your favorite and least favorite Roblox horror game? My favorite is probably FNAF 2 Reimagined. My least favorite is Don't Sleep. Dead Silence is awful. It just relies on cheap jump scares.
Favorite is Doors, Intruder, and Breaking Point. Least favorite is Dead Silence and The Blank Experience. Also try out
a stereotypical Obby.
Huh. That's a game I've never heard of, which is kinda on me because it has like millions of plays. But there's no way this can be a horror game, right? I mean, like, look at this guy. Look at him, he's so cute. He wouldn't hurt anybody. Oh. So it turns out this game, with literally the most simple premise imaginable, has multiple different games inside, multiple different and plenty of lore inside of it. So let's crack this bad boy open. On our first playthrough, we spawned into a lobby and then immediately had to leave because a random joined and I couldn't figure out how to make it private. But once I got into a solo lobby, we teleported to
the Obby.
Very creative naming, am I right?
Hello, and welcome to your Roblox Obby. Your goal is to get to the end. Simple enough for you, right? Make sure you stay on course. Whatever you do, don't wander off. We don't want you getting hurt.
Okay, wait a second. If this game is prioritizing safety, then why are we floating in a giant void? Okay, that's it. I'm done playing this stupid game. Oh, gameplay-wise, this is as simple as the name implies, a stereotypical Obby. And if you're Unk status like myself, it might be important to clarify what an Obby is. It's short for obviously a really good game. You jump from platform to platform, maybe sometimes the red blocks hurt you, and of course, like any good Obby, the world starts deteriorating around you, but that's later. Right now, we're on the very easy tier. We even still have our inconspicuous buddies to help us, aptly named the Helpers.
Careful when you're walking across. You don't want to accidentally plummet to your demise.
Yeah, no shit, man. I really hope this next guy has something useful to say. Oh,
hold on your pants.
A little pro gaming later, and I found the hardest obstacle in the game, my own stupidity. Watch as I hopelessly slam myself into this invisible wall as if one of these jumps is gonna fix anything. Okay, but seriously, like, I couldn't figure this out for so long. I ended up just resetting the game, but if one of you can tell me what I was doing wrong there, please let me know. The easy levels are pretty much the same as the ones before, but luckily those pesky helpers aren't here to annoy the piss out of me. Hopefully we won't have to see them again. And ironically, things start to go weird whenever we hit the normal levels. The background goes dark and the platforms turn a different shade. And I also got this hilarious shot of my Roblox character. But even though the void is less enticing, I wasn't really planning on paying it a visit anytime soon anyway, so there really isn't much to talk about in this portion of the game, so why don't we just jam out to the soundtrack while I blare a bunch of subscription CTAs. guys, I'm starting to think there might be something wrong with this game. Once we get to the difficult stages, the obby kind of stops being an obstacle course and more of a building. And if you pay close attention, you can kind of get some environmental storytelling. At the top of this tower and starting on stage 40, the stages shift from obstacles to houses with blocked off pathways, kind of like a maze. Once I climbed this truss, something odd happened. Worry not, viewers. I shat myself as well. Wherever we are, the place has been barricaded up in a very post-apocalyptic manner. We glitched through the floor into the 41st stage, where there seems to be giant rails leading us to this giant construction. I also heard that it's possible in this part of the game to come across like this phantom thing that watches over you. And after rewatching my gameplay, I believe that this is it. I think he just got stuck in the floor or something. After walking through some boarded up areas, we can kind of tell that we're walking through a city. I'm seeing like a lobby to maybe a hotel and some dumpsters outside. We can explore the city more, and I'm so used to tycoons that I stepped on this thing thinking it was a button. I am very smart. We walk through the crowded graveyard and we can see that it's even crowded on the inside. But when you go into the cells, you can see that there's red graves in the cells and then gray ones on the outside. Climbing out of this, we get a beautiful shot of the moon. They didn't even try to cut this out right. And the final stretch of the obby has us playing in traffic until the game kindly tells us to not do that. We try to reconnect, but it fails, telling us to please stop before it's too late. So of course, I quit immediately. Just kidding, helper jump scare. They say something that I can't make out. And then "what have you done" pops up on screen. We finally return to our shit show of an apartment and... but the moment you guys have all been waiting for is here. This already is a lot for an MuhKendric video, I believe, but I promise you we are just scratching the surface of this game. This game still has other endings for us to explore. But before we get into the next ending, I kind of just wanted to collect our thoughts a little bit. We dropped into an obby, our helper was super inconsiderate and annoying, and then the world collapsed in on itself. Everyone keeping up? Good. I'm actually really enjoying the design choices they made already. I think going with black and red was a really good idea because then you can keep the damage blocks red without actually changing anything. And all the surrounding props really adds to it being glitched. It's almost like two worlds are colliding with each other and they can only represent themselves through damage blocks and platforms and trusses, I guess. But twist horror has always had a charm to me, and this one is especially good, I think. Even though the first twist is pretty expected because of all the totally discreet foreshadowing, what we're about to see in the second ending had me so legitimately shocked. I'm really excited to show you guys. If you want to say this first ending was like a punch, the second ending is like a semi-truck hitting you 130 miles per hour in the face. And you guys know I'm usually pretty pessimistic when it comes to games, but some of the stuff that we're about to see is really good. And I would be lying if I didn't say that I jumped a good couple of times. But before we start the next run, let me talk about today's sponsor. Hey guys, if you guys don't want to hear this, go ahead and skip to this timestamp. I think it's pretty well known that I want to make YouTube my career. I've been going to college as a full-time student as well as working a part-time job and doing YouTube. So I'm doing anything in my power to get some sponsorships and make this a full-time job so that I can focus fully on YouTube. It's been really stressing me out knowing that I want to do YouTube full time, but I'm also like wasting money going to college just because I'm scared that this won't work out. But really anything you guys could do, if you guys could subscribe, and if you have some extra money, you could become a member. I'm trying to make it so that I make enough money to justify focusing on YouTube full time. I would really appreciate you guys' support, and thank you for joining me on this amazing, wacky journey. Starting up the game for the second time, if we want to activate the good ending, we need to do something surprisingly difficult. We need to sit here and not skip what the helper has to say. This is the worst part of the game, 0 out of 10. Damn, okay, chill bro, I didn't mean it.
But you know why you're here. You know what you created. You knew the consequences. You know what you have to do.
So obviously that has huge lore implications. I don't know why bro just had to dump that on me. It's kind of messed up. But I'm going to try and keep the lore discussion for later when we have a bit more information. But so far the helper has seemed to recognize us. And it really insinuates that we are the creator of the game. And whatever we're doing in this run might help us contain the monster that we probably let out. This run's going to be different now that we have a mission on our shoulders. Not only to help set things right, but also to satisfy the player's curiosity. Going about the game as as normal, it actually takes a while to notice any real changes. But when I got to 37, a clone of myself waved at me. And you know, this is probably supposed to be creepy, but come on, it's evil Walter White. But there's also this bridge of particles leading out to the side, perhaps a bridge into another reality, branching off from this game to another. We as players don't know what this is, but our character, the creator, knows very well that we're here for a reason. Going down the bridge, the void surrounds us until we see a bright white entranceway. Slowly we get closer, knowing that whatever's on the other side might tell us more about why we're here. And you know what? I'm gonna have to come back to this one because it's what I believe to be one of the most telling parts of the story. However, there's two other mini games that I'd really like to talk about first. Going into the first door, we're brought into a wooded area with noises calling from far into the woods. Personally, I think that this is the real start of the story. Yes, this far into the video. We can see in the bottom left, our goal is to complete the tycoon. Nothing necessarily seems off until we complete the entire tycoon though, and a new objective pops up. Investigate the trespasser. Going down the hall, fire alarms start blaring, forcing us to go backwards instead of actually confronting the trespasser. We try to go to the lobby like it says, but fiery debris blocks our path. And when we take the long way around, our only option is to hop ship. And I'll get back to this one later, but I think you guys can probably see where I'm going with this. The second minigame has a first-person perspective where you go up to the doors and shake them, but every time you turn around, the scene has changed. It's a really cool effect, and it makes it really hard to tell what's going on, especially since the further you go, the more weird things get. But when you try and click on a door twice, it says it won't change anything. Our character is desperately trying to run away. A voice calls out to us, "Don't look away. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Take me to another world." Disappointed helpers line the walls. "I'm so sorry, kid. I didn't know what I created. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." We turn to see the silhouette of a helper with the text, "I'm so sorry," popping up before it disappears. "Let me out of this world. Subscribe to MuhKendric." Whoa. And then this next part of the game, the text changes depending on where you are. Mine said my local time and the country I live in, but this detail is important because it proves that the voice in the game is talking directly to the player. Okay, so that whole scene was also a lot to take on, but I think the most important thing to point out is that I don't think that the red text is the big bad evil guy, even though the design might say so. The white text appearing at the bottom reads as our character, who I'm still assuming is the creator of the game, but I actually believe that these two roles are swapped. I think that the red text is actually the creator talking to the player, while the white text is the representation of evil, or who I'm gonna call the trespasser. I'm sorry if he already has a fan-given name, but I'm calling him the trespasser. Is everything starting to make sense? No? Well, don't worry, because that game that I was holding on to earlier might help us piece together this puzzle. This last level is, as I interpret it, the last entry in the story. We spawn into a room and we're told to ensure the subject's compliance. It might be obvious because of what we already know, but the subject is the trespasser. This minigame is sort of like a Five Nights at Freddy's game. You're meant to play a sound if he's at the door, flash a light if you hear him moving, and then deliver a controlled shock if he taps on the glass. Slowly, the compliance percentage goes up, and the closer you get to completion, the more distortion there is on both the visuals and the audio. This minigame is absolute cinema, and I mean that. The amount of tension that I felt in this game made me legitimately scared, and that's usually not a factor in Roblox horror games. But once the game is completed, you can leave, and then you return back to the Obby. Everything ends the same, except there isn't a part where the helpers yell at you. Instead, we get this screen. Part 1. You gotta be kidding me! So, there's actually 2 more endings to this game, one of which is just a troll, and the other adds extra information that really just brings out loose ends. Personally, I think that the story after the 2 endings gets a little convoluted for me. Maybe if I was MatPat, I'd be able to decipher it, but I'm not. So in the same way that FNAF 1 through 4 makes a pretty cohesive story, and then, you know, Scott Cawthon got a little too money hungry, I'm only gonna look at the first 2 endings to piece together what I think is happening in this game. So get ready, because I'm going game theory mode. The story of a stereotypical Obby. In the beginning, we start at the tycoon, and I think it's rather obvious what this is supposed to be. This part is telling the story of how the creator made the game being represented as the tycoon. When the creator of the game was finished, some sort of evil entered the game outside of his control, wreaking havoc and destroying the game. We see this in the tycoon falling apart, and similarly as the Obby falls apart when you go further in. Instead of the creator confronting the trespasser though, the creator has to run away, letting the trespasser roam freely in the game. This is what I consider the creator's big mistake, what everybody's giving him shit for. Somewhere in between the first and second minigame, the trespasser was able to somehow merge the game's world with the real world into one. The reason I think this is because of the slow merging of the Obby's landscape into a real city, and the cutscene and the bad ending further proves this point. The trespasser is somehow moving between the real and digital world to kill players like us. We start the second game in the perspective of the creator, trying to ignore the mess that he made with this game. His world slowly starts turning darker as it becomes increasingly difficult to ignore what he has done. Eventually, he tells himself, "Don't look away." He attempts to open another door, but the trespasser reminds him that it won't change anything. The creator starts to think about what he has done, and we see his internal monologue, "Guilty, guilty, guilty," as sad helpers line the wall, reminding him of his failure. "Take me to another world." The trespasser is asking to leave the game, as we've seen him do before. The creator begins to apologize, maybe to all the helpers or maybe to the player directly. Either way, it will make sense. The creator is confronting all of the helpers he let die, until he has a breakdown and we're teleported back to the Obby. The same way that the trespasser enters the real world through the game, I believe that his victims enter the game through the real world, and I think it only makes sense that the people enter as helpers. This explains why the helpers are so mad at the creator throughout the game, and it also explains why we're told to turn back before we get too close to the end. The creator is speaking to us here, telling us to stop playing before we're turned into a helper ourselves. The third game is the most important for a reason. I think the third game is actually happening in real time. This is our whole mission in the game, to trap the creature that's inside and stop it from killing more players. This is what the helper at the beginning was saying when he said, "You know what you need to do." He needs to finally confront the trespasser, what he should have done from the very beginning. When we do all the mini games, we no longer get scolded by the helpers. We finish what we started, but we didn't make things right. The helpers are still stuck in the game, and there's not much that the creator can do about that. And that's the best I've got, so I'm sorry if it's not very satisfying. I know there's still a lot of questions going on, like, what was going on in that jail from earlier? Why are the helpers so fucking annoying? And more importantly, what is the trespasser? Well, my answer to that is actually quite simple. The trespasser